Sign the papers or we shut down operations Monday. Victoria Sterling knew she was about to lose everything her father built. In desperation, born of corporate warfare, words escaped her lips that would change both their lives. If anyone can save this company, I'll marry them. The coffee cup rattled against its saucer as three men in Armani suits invaded her father's penthouse office. Victoria Sterling's coffee cup rattled against its saucer as three men in Armani suits invaded her father's penthouse office. The lead attorney's briefcase hit the mahogany table with the finality of a gavel, documents spilling out like an execution order. "Gentlemen, it's Saturday morning," Victoria said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "My legal team is irrelevant." The man's smile could have frozen champagne. Hartwell Industries owns 51% of your voting shares as of yesterday. You have 1 hour to sign voluntary merger papers, or we file for hostile takeover Monday at 9 a.m. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with the metallic taste of fear in Victoria's mouth. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan's weekend quiet felt like the calm before a corporate storm. Marcus Chen's wrench slipped, clattering against the HVAC duct as hostile takeover unfolded 15 feet from his weekend emergency repair. His worn coveralls and tool belt marked him as invisible in this world of power suits and predatory smiles. "You think you can just walk in here?" And Victoria started, "Mrs. Sterling, your father is dead. His little secrets died with him." The attorney gestured dismissively toward the vintage mechanical safe built into the wall. That antique couldn't save Sterling Industries from a competent 7-year-old, much less from us. Marcus watched through the maintenance panel gap as Victoria's hand moved protectively toward the safe. The Mosler Double Guard series, he'd helped design the integration protocols for systems like that, back when he was someone who mattered. His phone buzzed. Emma's text glowed. "Daddy, are you still at work? I need help with my project about heroes." Heroes. His 8-year-old daughter still believed her maintenance worker father was capable of heroic things. "I need time to consider," Victoria began. "Time's up." The attorney snapped his fingers. "Johnson, call the federal courthouse. File the emergency motion." A younger lawyer reached for his phone, but Victoria's voice cut through the air like breaking glass. "Wait." Her eyes found Marcus through the maintenance gap, desperation making her reckless. "If you can open this safe, I'll marry you." The attorneys burst into laughter. The lead man turned to see Marcus emerging from behind the panel, tool belt jangling, grease stains on his coveralls making him look even more out of place among the corporate warfare. "Ma'am." The attorney wheezed between chuckles. "Surely you're not serious about trusting the help with—" "Look at this guy." Another lawyer sneered. "What's he gonna do? Hit it with a wrench." Victoria's smile held cruel amusement as she looked Marcus up and down, single father, maintenance worker, someone so far beneath her notice that the marriage proposal was clearly a joke at his expense. Marcus stepped forward, his weathered hands steady despite 3 suits full of contempt focused on him. 20 years of being dismissed. 20 years of being treated like furniture in buildings he'd once helped design. 20 years of his daughter asking why Daddy couldn't find important work like other fathers. "Ma'am," he said quietly, approaching the safe that had defeated every professional locksmith team in the city. Some locks remembered their makers. The laughter died as his fingers found the dial mechanisms with practiced familiarity. The first tumbler clicked into place with a sound like thunder in the sudden silence. Victoria's smirk faltered as she realized the maintenance man she'd just publicly mocked might actually know what he was doing. The second tumbler found its position with mechanical precision. 20 years of muscle memory guiding Marcus's fingers around the dial. He could feel the attorney's laughter dying behind him, replaced by something that might have been nervousness. "This model," Marcus said, his voice steady as he worked. "They don't make them like this anymore. Mosler Double Guard series. Integrated security protocol." His calloused hands moved with surprising delicacy around the vintage dials. "Takes more than brute force to crack one of these." Victoria stepped closer, her expensive perfume mixing with the metallic scent of old steel. "You actually know what you're doing." "Ma'am." I've worked on systems like this before. Marcus's tool belt clinked softly as he adjusted his position, but his focus never left the safe. The third dial responded to his touch like an old friend recognizing a voice. The lead attorney cleared his throat. Mrs. Sterling, we don't have time for parlor tricks. Your deadline is 6 hours away. Victoria cut him off, her dismissive tone now directed at the suits instead of the maintenance man. He's got until then. Marcus pulled a worn leather notebook from his back pocket. Pages yellowed with age and use. Technical diagrams covered every available space. Mechanical specifications written in precise engineering script. He flipped through sections marked with careful tabs lock mechanisms. Security protocols. System integrations. My daughter thinks I fix broken things, Marcus said quietly, finding the page he needed. The notebook fell open to detailed schematics of vintage safe mechanisms, notes written in his own hand from years when those hands built security systems instead of just maintaining them. She's doing a project for her engineering fair tomorrow. Victoria watched over his shoulder as he compared the safe's configuration to his drawings. Engineering fair. Emma's 8. Wants to be a builder like her dad. Marcus's voice carried the weight of a man whose daughter still believed in him despite evidence to the contrary. She doesn't know I mostly just change air filters now. The attorney shifted impatiently. This is ridiculous. We're wasting time on. The fourth tumbler clicked into place, silencing him mid-sentence. Marcus straightened, his weathered hand still resting on the safe's dial mechanisms. 20 years of being invisible in corporate hallways. 20 years of being dismissed as just maintenance. And now 3 attorneys in $1,000 suits were hanging on his every movement. You know, he said, turning to meet Victoria's eyes directly for the first time. Locks have memory built into their mechanics. The original programmer leaves traces in the calibration, tiny adjustments that respond to familiar touch. He rotated the 5th dial with practiced confidence. Sometimes the lock remembers its maker. Victoria's breath caught as the mechanism responded with a deep, resonant click that seemed to shake the foundation of the building itself. The attorneys fell silent, their briefcases and hostile takeover documents suddenly seeming less important than the maintenance man who was making the impossible look routine. How many more? Victoria whispered. Marcus consulted his notebook, running calculations in his head that belonged to an engineer, not a janitor. 2 more sequences. Then we'll see what your father wanted to keep safe. The final tumbler turned under his guidance, and somewhere deep inside the Mosler double guard, steel mechanisms that had remained locked for months began to move with the inevitability of destiny. Then the Mosler's final mechanism disengaged with a sound like thunder trapped in steel. Marcus stepped back as the massive door swung open on silent hinges, revealing the dark interior of a vault that hadn't breathed outside air in months. Impossible, the lead attorney breathed, his briefcase forgotten on the table. 3 locksmith teams couldn't crack that thing. Victoria peered into the safe's depths, her hands trembling slightly. Instead of the legal documents she'd expected, the vault contained something far more complex: engineering blueprints, sealed evidence bags, and what looked like a complete forensic investigation laid out in meticulous detail. Marcus recognized the familiar precision of his own documentation methods, the same systematic approach he'd used 20 years ago when his job was protecting corporate assets instead of fixing their air conditioning. What's really in that safe that's worth a company's survival? Victoria whispered, her earlier dismissiveness replaced by something approaching awe. The question hung in the air like smoke, unanswered but electric with possibility. The lead attorney's phone buzzed with urgent authority. Federal courthouse. He answered, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Johnson, what do you mean the judge is asking questions? We filed everything correctly. His face went pale as he listened. The SEC. Since when does the Securities and Exchange Commission care about a routine merger? Victoria turned from the safe, sensing opportunity in the attorney's obvious distress. Gentlemen, it seems your timetable just changed. Marcus pulled another blueprint from the vault, this one bearing official stamps and signatures he recognized from his engineering days. The documents weren't just legal papers, they were system specifications, security protocols, and what looked like evidence of deliberate sabotage dating back decades. His phone vibrated. Emma's voice came through clear and excited. "Daddy, I found pictures of your old work online. You used to design security for really important buildings. Why didn't you tell me you were famous?" The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Famous. His 8-year-old daughter had discovered what he'd been trying to forget, that Marcus Chen, P.E., had once been someone who mattered in the corporate world. "Mrs. Sterling," the lead attorney said, closing his phone with shaking hands. "We need to discuss revised terms. It seems certain irregularities in our client's previous acquisitions have come to light." Victoria's smile could have powered the building's emergency systems. Irregularities. Marcus spread the blueprints across her father's desk, his engineering training taking over as he analyzed the documentation. 20 years of institutional memory came flooding back security protocols he'd designed, systems he'd integrated, and, most importantly, the deliberate flaws that had been introduced after his forced departure. "These aren't just legal documents," he said quietly, his voice carrying newfound authority. "This is evidence of systematic corporate espionage. Your father documented everything." The lead attorney's confidence crumbled like cheap concrete. "Now, wait just a minute." "No," Victoria said, her hand resting on the safe that had just transformed from obstacle into weapon. "You wait. It seems my father left me more than just a company to protect." Marcus looked up from the blueprints, meeting her eyes with the steady gaze of someone who just remembered exactly who he used to be. The maintenance worker facade was beginning to crack, revealing glimpses of the security architect who'd once been the best in the business. The safe had kept more than documents. It had preserved the truth that would change everything. Marcus spread the engineering schematics across Victoria's father's desk with systematic precision, his movements carrying the practiced efficiency of someone who'd analyzed complex security breaches before. The blueprints revealed a story written in technical specifications and timestamps, a methodical pattern of system vulnerabilities introduced after his departure from Sterling Industries. The tolerance specifications on these access protocols were altered, he said, his finger tracing modified security pathways. "Someone with intimate knowledge of the original design systematically weakened your father's defenses." Victoria leaned over his shoulder, her expensive perfume mixing with the musty scent of old documents. "You can read all this." "Ma'am, I wrote half of these protocols 20 years ago." Marcus pulled his reading glasses from his shirt pocket, the simple gesture transforming him from maintenance worker to technical analyst. "Your father kept detailed records of every security modification made after my departure. This isn't random corporate espionage. This was surgical sabotage by someone who understood exactly what they were destroying." The lead attorney shifted nervously near the window, his earlier confidence replaced by the pallor of someone watching carefully laid plans unravel. "Mrs. Sterling, these documents prove nothing about our current merger proposal." Marcus looked up from the blueprints, his eyes holding the steady authority of an expert witness. "Actually, they prove everything." Victoria's desk phone rang with the sharp insistence of crisis management. "Sterling Industries," she answered, her voice crisp despite the chaos surrounding her. "Victoria, thank God I reached you." The voice belonged to her head of legal, calling from what sounded like a car speeding through weekend traffic. "The SEC has frozen all merger activity pending investigation. 4 hours until they file preliminary injunctions against Hartwell Industries." Marcus watched Victoria's face cycle through relief, vindication, and something that looked like the first taste of genuine hope she'd felt in months. The corporate raiders who'd seemed unstoppable an hour ago were now scrambling to avoid federal charges. 4 hours, Victoria repeated, meeting Marcus's gaze with new understanding. "That gives us time to document everything properly." She hung up and turned to the attorneys, who were already gathering their briefcases with the hurried movements of people planning strategic retreats. "Gentlemen, it seems your 60-minute deadline just became irrelevant." Marcus felt his phone vibrate. Emma's latest message glowed on the screen. "Dad, The internet says you invented security systems for banks and governments. Are you secretly a superhero? The question hit him harder than it should have. Superhero. His daughter's faith in him had never wavered, even when his own belief in his abilities had crumbled under 20 years of being treated as disposable. Mrs. Sterling, the lead attorney said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Even if these documents raise questions about historical practices, they don't invalidate our legitimate business interests. Marcus stood slowly, his full height and engineering credentials finally visible in the way he carried himself. Legitimate business interests don't require systematic security sabotage spanning 2 decades. He pulled a sealed evidence bag from the safe, its contents visible through clear plastic USB drives, backup tapes, and what appeared to be recorded communications. Your father wasn't just documenting the sabotage. He was building a federal case. Victoria's hands trembled as she examined the evidence. All these years, I thought he was just being paranoid about corporate security. Paranoid men don't survive in business as long as your father did, Marcus said quietly. They survive by being right about threats other people can't see. The attorneys exchanged glances that spoke volumes about damage control and legal liability. Their hostile takeover had transformed into a federal investigation, and the maintenance man they'd mocked an hour ago was reading their sabotage tactics like a technical manual. This changes everything, Victoria whispered. Marcus checked his watch, the gesture carrying weight it hadn't possessed since his engineering days. Ma'am, we've got 4 hours to present a case that's been 20 years in the making. The safe had revealed more than documents. It had preserved a pattern of corporate warfare that reached far beyond Sterling Industries, and the evidence was speaking in a voice that demanded justice. The penthouse elevator chimed with corporate authority as building security stepped into Victoria's office, 3 men in navy blazers with the crisp efficiency of private military contractors. Their leader, a granite-faced man with graying temples, surveyed the scene with calculating eyes. Ms. Sterling, we have reports of unauthorized personnel accessing sensitive company materials. His gaze fixed on Marcus with practiced dismissal. Sir, I need to see your maintenance credentials and building clearance immediately. The lead attorney's confidence resurged like water finding cracks in concrete. Thank you for responding so quickly. Mr. Harrison, this individual has been impersonating qualified personnel and potentially compromising company security. Marcus felt the familiar weight of 20 years' worth of dismissals, but his hands remained steady as he reached for his wallet. The worn maintenance ID photo stared back at him. Marcus Chen. Building Services. Clearance Level 2. Not Marcus Chen. P.E. Security Architect. Just another invisible worker in coveralls. Ma'am, Harrison said to Victoria, company policy requires all non-executive personnel to be escorted from the premises during sensitive corporate proceedings. Victoria's jaw tightened. Mr. Harrison, this man has been instrumental in accessing crucial company documents he had no authorization to access. The attorney interjected smoothly. His presence here represents a serious breach of corporate confidentiality protocols. Marcus pulled his engineering notebook from the safe's evidence pile, its weathered pages containing technical specifications that predated most of the people in the room. The margins were filled with his handwritten notes, system vulnerabilities he'd identified, security recommendations that had been ignored, and, most damning of all, modification requests that had been implemented after his forced departure. Mr. Harrison, Marcus said quietly, opening the notebook to a page marked with careful tabs. Does Sterling Industries still use the integrated access control system installed in 2004? Harrison's professional mask flickered for just a moment. That information is classified. Level 7 clearance codes. Biometric integration with legacy mechanical systems. Redundant failsafes programmed into the building's HVAC network. Marcus recited the specifications from memory, his voice carrying the authority of someone who designed every word. The system I'm describing doesn't appear in any current company documentation because it was installed under a classified government contract. The attorneys exchanged glances that spoke volumes about damage control strategies rapidly becoming obsolete. Victoria stepped forward, something crystallizing in her expression. Mr. Chen, are you telling me you designed our current security infrastructure? Ma'am, I designed the security infrastructure for half the financial district. Marcus closed the notebook with deliberate precision, including the systems that someone has been systematically compromising for the past 20 years. Harrison's hand moved toward his radio, but Marcus's next words stopped him cold. The HVAC maintenance access codes I used this morning are still active in your system. Alpha Prime clearance, issued under a federal security contract that technically never expired. The building security chief's face went pale. Alpha Prime clearance didn't exist on paper. It was ghost authorization for engineers working classified government projects, the kind of credentials that open doors most people didn't even know existed. That's impossible. Harrison breathed. Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket, speed dialing a number he hadn't called in 20 years. Emma, honey, I need you to do Daddy a favor. Remember those old ID cards in my desk drawer? Can you read me the numbers on the one that says Federal Security Certification? His daughter's voice came through the speaker, clear and proud. Sure. Daddy. It says Marcus Chen, Principal Engineer, Clearance Level Alpha Prime, Certification Number 7749, issued March 15th, 2008. Daddy. This card says you're authorized for all federal security installations. That sounds really important. The silence in the penthouse office was deafening. The lead attorney's briefcase hit the floor as he fumbled for his phone, his earlier arrogance replaced by the frantic energy of someone trying to stop an avalanche with paperwork. We need immediate legal consultation. Federal security clearances change the entire scope of everything, Victoria finished, her voice carrying the steel of someone who just realized her father's final chess move was more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. They change everything. Marcus pocketed his phone, his daughter's proud voice still echoing in his ears. 20 years of being dismissed. 20 years of being treated as disposable. And Emma had just read aloud the credentials that proved he'd never stopped being the man who built unbreachable security systems. Harrison stepped back from Marcus with the careful respect reserved for federal authorities. Sir, we weren't informed of any ongoing security consultation because it was classified, Marcus said simply. Your CEO's father hired me under federal contract to document and prevent the exact corporate espionage you've been experiencing for 2 decades. The attorneys were already gathering their documents with the hurried movements of people planning strategic retreats. But their briefcases and merger papers seemed suddenly inadequate against 20 years of documented federal evidence. Victoria's hand found the engineering notebook, its pages now revealed as something far more dangerous than technical specifications. You've been working undercover this entire time. Marcus met her eyes with the steady gaze of someone who just remembered exactly who he was. Ma'am, I never stopped working. I just got very good at being invisible. The safe had revealed more than evidence. It had preserved the identity of a federal security consultant whose job had been to catch corporate saboteurs in the act. Victoria's secure line rang with the authority of federal intervention. She answered on speaker, her voice steady despite the corporate warfare unfolding in her office. Miss Sterling, this is Margaret Hayes, General Counsel for the Securities and Exchange Commission. We're calling to verify the identity of a federal security consultant who may be assisting with your current corporate crisis. Marcus felt 20 years of careful invisibility evaporating in real time. The attorneys froze like deer in headlights, their merger documents suddenly seeming as relevant as yesterday's stock prices. Ma'am, the SEC counsel continued. We need to confirm the active status of Principal Engineer Marcus Chen. Federal Security Clearance, Alpha Prime. Certification Number 7749, issued March 15th, 2008. Our records indicate he was assigned to Sterling Industries under classified government contract for ongoing corporate espionage investigation. Victoria's eyes found Marcus across the office, seeing him clearly for the first time, not maintenance worker, not even security consultant, but federal investigator whose 20-year assignment was about to surface from the shadows. Mr. Chen is present, Victoria said carefully. Sir, please confirm your current operational status. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying authority that hadn't been heard in Sterling Industries' executive offices in 2 decades. Federal security consultation active. Assignment parameters unchanged since initial deployment. Thank you, Mr. Chen. The SEC counsel continued, her voice carrying the weight of federal backing. For the record, your classified assignment involved documenting systematic corporate espionage targeting Sterling Industries and related financial sector entities. Your findings have been integral to our ongoing federal investigation into market manipulation and hostile takeover fraud. The lead attorney's face went ashen. Federal investigation? We were never informed. Mr. Harrison. The SEC voice cut through his protests like a blade. Corporate raiders operating under fraudulent pretenses are not typically informed of federal surveillance operations. Marcus pulled the final evidence bag from the safe. Its contents now revealed as more than corporate documentation recorded communications, financial transaction records, and what appeared to be a complete surveillance operation spanning 2 decades. Your father didn't just hire me to design security systems, Marcus said to Victoria, his voice quiet but carrying absolute certainty. He hired me to catch the people who were systematically destroying them. Harrison stepped back from the evidence spread across Victoria's desk, his professional confidence cracking like thin ice. Sir, if you're federal law enforcement, why the maintenance cover? Because maintenance workers are invisible. Marcus replied simply, we can access every system, every floor, every conversation. 20 years of corporate espionage requires 20 years of patient documentation. The SEC counsel's voice returned with bureaucratic precision. Mr. Chen, we're prepared to unseal your investigative findings, pending resolution of current hostile takeover attempt. What's your assessment of Hartwell Industries' acquisition methods? Marcus opened his engineering notebook to pages that were no longer technical specifications, but evidence logs. Systematic. Professional. 20 years of market manipulation disguised as legitimate business practice. They've used the same playbook on 17 different corporate targets. Victoria felt the weight of understanding settle on her shoulders like lead blankets. You've been watching them the entire time. Ma'am, I've been documenting them the entire time. Your father understood that some corporate raids aren't business. They're organized crime with better lawyers. The attorneys were already moving toward the exit. Their briefcases and merger documents transformed from weapons into evidence of federal crimes. Their 60-minute deadline had become a countdown to indictments. Gentlemen, Victoria called after them, her voice carrying newfound steel. I believe federal agents will want to discuss your acquisition methods in considerably more detail. The door closed behind them, with the finality of justice delayed but not denied. Mr. Chen, the SEC counsel said, we'll need your complete investigative file transferred to federal prosecutors within 48 hours. 20 years of evidence requires careful legal preparation. Marcus looked around the penthouse office where he'd spent 2 decades being invisible, documenting crimes that powerful people assumed would never be discovered. Ma'am, the evidence has been ready for federal presentation since day 1. Victoria's phone buzzed. Emma's voice filled the office through the speaker. Daddy, are you really helping save a whole company? The news says there are federal agents and everything. The question hit Marcus harder than any corporate power play. His 8-year-old daughter was watching her maintenance worker father transform into someone whose work actually mattered on the evening news. Emma, honey, Daddy's just doing his job. The important job, or the fixing things job. Marcus met Victoria's eyes, seeing respect where contempt had existed an hour earlier. Both, sweetheart. Sometimes the most important job is fixing things that powerful people broke. The SEC counsel's voice carried final authority. Mr. Chen, your cover assignment is officially concluded. Sterling Industries is now under federal protection pending prosecution of corporate espionage charges. The safe had revealed more than evidence. It had preserved a federal operation that turned corporate raiders into defendants and maintenance workers into the architects of justice. The secure line went dead, leaving Marcus and Victoria alone in the penthouse office that had witnessed 20 years of invisible warfare. Federal protection sounded reassuring in theory, but the reality hit Marcus like cold water. His cover was blown. His federal assignment concluded, and Emma would never again have a father who simply fixed broken things in anonymous buildings. "Mr. Chen," Victoria said quietly, "I owe you an apology that goes far beyond this morning." Marcus gathered his engineering notebook and federal evidence. Muscle memory, preparing for another disappearance. Another identity shift to some new assignment in some other city. "Ma'am, I was just doing my job." For 20 years, living as maintenance staff while corporate raiders destroyed companies around you. Victoria's voice carried the weight of someone finally understanding the price of justice. "What did that cost you?" Marcus thought of Emma's school presentations, where other children talked about their parents' impressive careers while his daughter proudly announced that Daddy fixed important buildings. The protective lie had become truth, but truth came with consequences neither of them had anticipated. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, kids at school saw you on the news. They want to know if you're really a secret agent. Can I tell them you're a superhero?" The question that should have brought joy instead felt like a stone in his chest. Victoria's office phone rang with the harsh insistence of crisis management escalating beyond corporate control. She answered on speaker, her voice steady despite the mounting pressure. "Victoria, this is Tom Bradley at Channel 7 News. We're running a story in 1 hour about federal investigations into corporate takeover fraud. Our sources indicate Sterling Industries has been under federal surveillance for 2 decades. Can you confirm the identity of the undercover agent involved?" Marcus felt his anonymity evaporating in real time. 20 years of careful invisibility, of being the maintenance worker nobody noticed, were about to become prime-time television. Emma's quiet pride in her father was about to become national attention neither of them wanted. "No comment," Victoria said. But her eyes met Marcus's with understanding. Federal protection meant federal publicity, and federal publicity meant Emma's life would never be private again. "We've also received reports that Hartwell Industries may face federal racketeering charges. The investigation apparently involves 17 separate corporate raids over 20 years. This could be the largest corporate espionage case in decades." Victoria hung up, the weight of unintended consequences settling over both of them like storm clouds. 2 hours until the story breaks," she said quietly. Marcus pulled out his phone, Emma's number glowing on the speed dial like a lifeline to everything that mattered more than corporate justice. His finger hovered over the call button as he wrestled with a choice that would define both their futures. "She deserves to know," Victoria said, reading his hesitation with the insight of someone who'd also learned that powerful truths came with powerful prices. "Emma, honey," Marcus said when his daughter answered, her voice bright with weekend excitement. "Daddy, are you really on the news? Mrs. Patterson next door says you caught bad guys." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 20 years pressing down like water behind a dam. "Sweetheart, Daddy needs to tell you something important. Remember how I said I fix buildings?" "Uh-huh. Well, I also fix problems for people when bad guys try to hurt their companies. I've been doing that for a really long time. And now everyone's going to know about it." Emma's silence stretched for heartbeats that felt like hours. When she spoke, her voice carried the steady wisdom that 8-year-olds sometimes possess in moments that matter most. "Dad, does that mean you won't be able to be invisible anymore?" The question hit him like a physical blow. His daughter understood better than any federal agent that invisibility had been his greatest protection for both of them. "No, sweetheart. Daddy won't be invisible anymore." "Good," Emma said with fierce pride. "I never wanted you to be invisible anyway." Victoria watched Marcus straighten his shoulders. 20 years of careful anonymity falling away like shed skin. The federal investigation would continue. The corporate raiders would face justice. But the price of truth was a father and daughter who could never again live in the shadows. 2 hours, Marcus said. pocketing his phone with new resolution. That gives us time to make sure the evidence speaks louder than the headlines. What do you need? Marcus opened his notebook to pages that were no longer just engineering specifications, but testimony that could reshape how corporate espionage was prosecuted in federal court. I need to make sure Emma understands that sometimes the most important job is standing up in public and telling the truth, even when it's dangerous. Victoria's voice carried the steel of someone who'd found her own courage in the past few hours. Then let's make sure the truth is worth the risk you're both taking. Marcus looked around the penthouse office where he'd spent 20 years being invisible, documenting crimes that powerful people assumed would never surface. The window of opportunity was closing, but the evidence was ready. Emma was proud, and for the first time in 2 decades, Marcus Chen was prepared to be visible. The safe had preserved more than federal evidence. It had protected a father's ability to choose courage over safety when the moment demanded both. The Sterling Industries boardroom filled with the controlled chaos of federal intervention as emergency session convened 90 minutes before the media storm would break. 7 board members, 3 federal prosecutors, 2 SEC investigators, and Marcus Chen, no longer maintenance worker, but expert witness whose testimony would reshape corporate law enforcement. Ladies and gentlemen, federal prosecutor Janet Morrison began, her voice carrying the authority of 2 decades in white-collar crime prosecution. We're here to present evidence of systematic corporate espionage targeting Sterling Industries and 16 other financial sector entities. Marcus opened his engineering notebook. Its weathered pages now revealed as investigative documentation that would serve as primary evidence in what prosecutors were already calling the largest corporate racketeering case in federal history. Mr. Chen, Prosecutor Morrison continued, please state your qualifications for this testimony. Marcus Chen, Principal Engineer, Federal Security Clearance Alpha Prime, 20 years undercover investigation, specialized in corporate espionage documentation. His voice carried authority earned through 2 decades of invisible service. I designed security systems for Sterling Industries under classified federal contract, then documented their systematic compromise by hostile acquisition teams. Victoria watched from the head of the conference table as Marcus transformed completely from the dismissed maintenance worker of this morning to federal expert whose every word would determine the fate of corporate raiders who'd assumed themselves untouchable. Marcus pulled evidence bags from the safe's contents, each one marked with federal chain of custody documentation spanning 20 years of patient investigation. Exhibit A, recorded communications between Hartwell Industries executives discussing market manipulation tactics. Exhibit B, financial transaction records showing coordinated attacks on 17 separate corporate targets. Exhibit C, technical specifications proving deliberate security sabotage. The HVAC system whispered overhead as Marcus referenced his notebook, the same system that had provided cover for 20 years of evidence gathering. The same system that hostile acquisition teams had never suspected carried federal surveillance equipment. The access protocols I used this morning weren't routine maintenance. Marcus continued, his technical expertise now serving justice instead of invisibility. Alpha Prime clearance provided complete building access for federal investigation purposes. Every conversation, every document, every strategic meeting has been documented under federal surveillance authority. Board member Harrison shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Chen, you're saying you've been recording confidential corporate communications? Sir, I've been documenting federal crimes disguised as legitimate business practices. Prosecutor Morrison spread technical diagrams across the conference table, the same engineering schematics Marcus had shown Victoria hours earlier, now serving as evidence in federal court proceedings. Mr. Chen's investigation has provided documentation for racketeering charges against Hartwell Industries and associated entities. The boardroom's secure phone system chimed with federal authority. This is SEC Director Williams calling to confirm the status of emergency proceedings. Victoria answered on speaker, her voice steady with newfound confidence. Director Williams, Federal Prosecutor Morrison is presenting evidence in emergency session. Ms. Sterling, We've coordinated with federal prosecutors to announce indictments against Hartwell Industries within the hour. Mr. Chen's 20-year investigation has provided sufficient evidence for racketeering, securities fraud, and corporate espionage charges affecting multiple publicly traded entities. Marcus felt his phone vibrate. Emma's video call request appeared on screen, her face glowing with pride when he accepted. "Daddy, can I see where you work? The important work, not the fixing things work." The 8-year-old's voice filled the federal boardroom with the kind of innocent wonder that reminded everyone present why corporate justice mattered. "Emma, sweetheart, Daddy's helping make sure bad people can't hurt good companies anymore. Are you like a superhero now?" Marcus looked around the boardroom where 20 years of invisible investigation was finally serving public justice, where his daughter could see him as someone who built protection instead of just maintaining it. "No, sweetheart. I'm like an engineer who builds truth instead of buildings." Prosecutor Morrison addressed the board with final authority. Sterling Industries is officially under federal protection. The systematic corporate espionage documented by Mr. Chen's investigation has been disrupted. Hartwell Industries and associated entities will face federal prosecution. Victoria stood, her voice carrying the steel of someone who'd found courage through understanding. "Mr. Chen, on behalf of Sterling Industries and the thousands of employees whose jobs you've protected, thank you for 20 years of service we never knew we needed." The boardroom fell silent as Marcus closed his engineering notebook. 20 years of patient documentation finally serving its intended purpose. Through the video call, Emma's proud smile reminded him that the most important engineering project wasn't building security systems. It was building a world where his daughter could be proud of her father's work. "Ma'am," Marcus said quietly, "sometimes the most important job is the one nobody sees until it's time to stand up and tell the truth." Federal agents were already coordinating arrests of corporate raiders who'd spent decades assuming their crimes would remain invisible. The safe had preserved more than evidence. It had protected a federal operation that proved patient justice was stronger than corporate power. The engineering notebook that had once documented building systems now documented the downfall of an entire criminal enterprise. And Marcus Chen, no longer invisible, stood ready to testify in federal court about 20 years of corporate warfare fought from the shadows. Emma's laughter filled the boardroom through the video call, the sound of a daughter who'd always believed her father was capable of heroic things, finally seeing the world agree with her assessment. 6 weeks after the Sterling Industries revelations made federal headlines, Marcus Chen stood in the lobby of the newly constructed Federal Corporate Security Training Center, watching Emma present her engineering fair project to a room full of government officials and corporate security professionals. The irony wasn't lost on him. His daughter was explaining building security principles to people who'd spent careers thinking they understood corporate protection. "My dad taught me that the strongest security systems protect people, not just money," Emma said, her voice clear and confident as she demonstrated her scale model of integrated building defenses. "He says the best engineers build things that make good people safe and bad people sorry." Federal Prosecutor Morrison approached Marcus, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. 17 corporate entities under federal investigation, 43 individual indictments, and an estimated $2 billion in fraudulent transactions documented. "Mr. Chen, your 20-year investigation has reshaped how we prosecute corporate espionage." Marcus watched his daughter field questions from security professionals who treated her insights with the respect reserved for genuine expertise. "Ma'am, I just documented what I saw. Emma's the one who understands what it all means." The training center buzzed with weekend activity as corporate security teams learned new protocols based on Marcus's investigative methods. His invisible 20-year operation had become curriculum for protecting American businesses from systematic fraud. Victoria Sterling entered the presentation room with the quiet authority of someone who'd survived corporate warfare and emerged stronger. 6 weeks as CEO of a federally protected company had taught her that real security came from people like Marcus professionals who built protection systems while others built profit margins. "Emma, that's a remarkable project," Victoria said. examining the girl's engineering model with genuine interest. Your father's methods are being implemented by security teams across the financial sector. Emma beamed with the pride of a child whose father had transformed from invisible maintenance worker to federal consultant whose expertise commanded respect from government officials and corporate executives alike. "Ms. Sterling," Marcus said quietly. "How's Sterling Industries adapting to federal protection protocols?" "Better than expected. Turns out that companies perform more efficiently when they're not under constant attack from corporate raiders." Victoria's smile carried the satisfaction of someone who'd learned that ethical business practices were also profitable business practices. "We're implementing your security integration methods throughout our entire operational structure." The afternoon sunlight streaming through the training center's windows illuminated technical diagrams that bore Marcus's signature, no longer hidden documentation, but public curriculum for corporate protection. As the presentation concluded, Emma packed her engineering materials with the methodical precision she'd inherited from her father. Government officials and corporate security professionals approached her with business cards and university scholarship offers, treating an 8-year-old's insights as genuinely valuable contributions to federal security policy. "Dad," Emma said as they prepared to leave, "Mrs. Patterson says people on TV are calling you a hero. Are you famous now?" Marcus considered the question while watching federal agents coordinate security training based on his investigative methods. Famous felt like the wrong word for someone who'd spent 20 years perfecting the art of invisibility. "Sweetheart, I'm not famous. I'm just visible now." He hefted Emma's engineering project, its weight somehow lighter than the federal evidence he'd carried for 2 decades. Sometimes the most important work happens when people can see it. And sometimes it happens when they can't. The important thing is that the work gets done. Emma nodded with the wisdom of someone who'd always understood that her father built important things, even when the world couldn't see them. "I'm glad you're visible now, Dad. It's easier to be proud of people when everyone else can see why." The training center's lobby filled with weekend foot traffic corporate security teams, federal investigators, and families like Marcus and Emma who discovered that invisible heroism eventually needed to surface for justice to be complete. Victoria approached them near the exit, her expression carrying gratitude that had deepened over 6 weeks of understanding. "Mr. Chen, Sterling Industries would like to offer you a permanent position as Chief Security Consultant. Emma, we'd also like to fund your engineering education through graduate school." Marcus looked at his daughter, seeing not the 8-year-old who'd asked if he was a superhero, but the future engineer who would build security systems that protected people instead of just property. "Ma'am," Marcus said, "we'll consider any opportunity that lets Emma build things that make the world safer." Emma grinned with the confidence of someone whose father had taught her that the most important engineering projects were the ones that protected people who couldn't protect themselves. The federal training center hummed with weekend activity as corporate security professionals learned new methods of protection. And somewhere in that busy building, the invisible work of keeping good people safe continued under Marcus Chen's watchful expertise. Sometimes the most important stories begin in shadows and end in sunshine. But they always end with people who understand that building security means building trust, one invisible day at a time.